Yes.
Hi, I was just wondering if you could do 2 favors.
Well, what are they?
Taking me to the nearest police station. Well, actually, just one's fine.
What's going on, son? Have a seat there.
Since it's personal business.
Have a seat. What's your name? I just had a 12-year-old boy show up here at my front door asking for help. And he's said he just came from a neighbor's house. He's emaciated. He's got tape around his legs. He's hungry and he's thirsty.
Need someone immediately.
But he has duct tape around
Big
his ankle.
injuries, and there's sores around them.
Yeah, there's sores around him. I think there's a good chance he's been.
And he also has
And he has it
around
around his
his
ankle.
wrist as well.
And his wrist as well. Okay, this boy is bad.
Needs immediate attention.
Hi guys, thank you for joining me. Today's case is one that I know loads of you will be aware of, and it's taken me quite a while to get around to doing this one just because it felt really in-depth, and also just to ensure that I might give you some information and knowledge that you haven't already heard or been aware of. So it takes a little bit of extra work, but nonetheless, you've asked for it, and therefore I am going to cover this case. Before I kick off with today's true crime case, however, you will notice I'm wearing some new merch. Yes, hot off the press. And when I mean hot off the press, I mean literally hot off the press upstairs where we make it, because I have my human lie detector t-shirt. I love this because obviously I secretly think I am. I don't know about you. I think it's probably more a female thing though. Shout at me in the comments if you disagree. But I do think that us ladies in particular like to believe that we're very intuitive. And if you're lying to us, we know. So now I can just wear this, and when anybody says anything that I think's a porky pie, I'm just going to go, take a look at the t-shirt. Look at the t-shirt. Have a look at the t-shirt. What's it saying to you? What's it giving off? And hopefully that will make sure that the person who is telling one of those porcupines is aware that I'm onto them, shall we say. Also, for those of you who are following me on YouTube membership and Patreon, thank you so much. I hope you're enjoying all the extra content. Those full-length ones that I do for you are wonderful there because I don't have to worry about any of the community guidelines when it comes down to YouTube. So it means I can put whatever I like on there, and additional content at my leisure is being placed there. Also, as ever, a massive thank you to all of you, because without you, I cannot do what I do here. So thank you very much. Right, let's get on with today's true crime case. So let's go back to the 30th of August 2023. It's about 10:50 in Ivins, Utah. At this point, a 12-year-old boy who's literally covered in open wounds knocks at the door of one of his neighbours, and he's basically just pleading with this neighbour for food and water. And understandably, that is so left field. That's not what anybody expects. When you think about the Western world in particular, you're not used to having dehydrated, starving children turning up at your door, and add to that a very badly injured child. It will be terrifying to encounter that situation. And of course, the immediacy of that situation is that you want to help. So when this is all playing out, it turns out he's escaped, and I'll use the word escaped for the right reasons, because he essentially was a prisoner at a nearby home. What he managed to do was he climbed out of a window and he ran away and had basically gone and asked for help. And the courage it will have taken for that child to have done that is enormous. I think that we can all look back to being young people and people having authority over us and feeling that we don't have the level of power and control that we desire, and knowing that people who are in authority over us want us to act a certain way that might not be in line or keeping with our own beliefs. But breaking the boundary and breaching their rules and regulations is absolutely terrifying. And particularly if you add to that a child who's being abused and imprisoned, the idea of escaping and then going and speaking to another adult when you don't trust the ones who are already in your life, that's going to be hugely challenging. And he's taking a risk. He doesn't know how this is going to play out. He could get returned to the place where he's come from and things could get even worse for him. So just to acknowledge the bravery it would have taken for that child to act in this manner. Now, immediately when this neighbour sees this young boy, sees the wounds, hears the pleas coming from the child, he calls 911, and they basically tell the emergency services they've got this child here who looks emaciated, seems malnourished, and also just has these horrific open wounds and also duct tape around his extremities. So even if you don't quite know what's been playing out in this child's life, even if you haven't got the information that leads you to understand why he's turned up at your home, the minute that you're looking at open wounds and duct tape on them, you're thinking to yourself something criminal has played out. Because we associate duct tape and we associate wounds with the worst type of criminal acts that we can ever hear about. That's what you hear about in horror movies. So you can imagine how blindsided this neighbour is. And he said, I just had a 12-year-old boy show up here at my front door asking for help. He said he'd just come from a neighbour's house, and we know there's been problems at this neighbour's house. He's emaciated, he's got tape around his legs, he's hungry, he's thirsty. So the police obviously get over there. And immediately their eyes tell them there is something sinister that's played out. They can see just looking at this child, he's incredibly malnourished and he's got these severe injuries. At this point, their main concern is about getting that child to safety and making sure that they're given the appropriate treatment. So he's taken to hospital. And indeed, he is suffering from malnourishment. Just put that into context. We're talking about an era in the Western world where we're not expecting to see this. We see a lot of things where abuse is concerned, but a child starving is not what we expect or anticipate, because for the most part, even poor people can find ways of nourishing themselves to a degree. So it's usually purposeful when a child has been neglected to such a degree that they're starving. So he's actually at this point put on medical hold, and the reason for that is he had deep lacerations because he'd been tied up with rope. So they're really concerned about what has been going on, and they know automatically they're dealing with a high level of abuse in this situation. The police are also informed by the child that he's not the only person who's been suffering, and so the police then go and search the home, and they actually do find another 10-year-old child. So she's found malnourished, she's indeed taken to hospital. At this point, they have a search warrant for the house, and it's an absolute torture chamber with respect. They find evidence consistent with all the markings that have been found on the first child. So they find 3 ropes, they find 2 handcuffs, they find 2 bowls containing this paste of cayenne pepper and honey. They find bandages, plastic wrap. They also find a journal and they find some paperwork. But immediately it ties in with what they're seeing. And the very fact that they've got this weird mix of cayenne pepper and honey in a paste, it's as if somebody's decided that they're going to be able to carry out some home treatment for the injuries that the children have sustained. So automatically they know that something has been playing out dreadfully in this home. What they do know at this point is that children have clearly been abused in this home. What they don't know is why, or essentially who has carried out this abuse. Now, when it tracks back, it turns out that the mother of the children who've been found is well known to some degree. She's called Ruby Franke. Now, Ruby Franke Griffiths was born on January the 18th, 1982. She was married to a guy called Kevin Franke. She was somebody who had been a well-known mother and influencer on YouTube, and essentially they had been bringing up their family together for a period of time. They'd actually had 6 children. They lived in Springville in Utah, and essentially she had a celebrity status for a period of time because in 2015, Ruby and Kevin Franke launched the 8 Passengers YouTube channel. So basically it's a family channel. It's where it shows a typical Mormon suburban family, and it essentially focused on the parenting style, the way that the children were being brought up, their discipline and how that was dealt with. She actually told local news that one of the reasons that she enjoyed doing her YouTube channel and actually filming her children was that it really helped her to live in the present and to just allow her to enjoy the kids. I actually find that quite unusual. Don't get me wrong, everybody's different, and I suppose one can say that if you're filming your kids, you're really concentrating and focused on what they're doing, and then you're editing it so it's bringing you back to the moments that you've shared. But for me, whenever I am filming through a screen my children, I always feel a little bit disassociated from it. almost as if it's happening, but I don't feel fully engaged. Whereas what I tend to do when I'm doing stuff with my children, whether that's going out for food or whether that's playing in the garden with my little girl, I put my phone away because it really does distract me. I am a YouTube obsessive when it comes down to watching lots of different content. And if it's present, there's that desire to just kind of have a flick through and check your social media, make sure nobody's texted you. And even though that might only be momentary, it's given a direct message to my children, and that direct message is, I'm not fully present for you. But like I said, for her, she's suggesting that this is the reason that she's doing it. It connects her with the kids and makes her live in the present. And wow, it goes great guns. They amass over 2 million YouTube subscribers. They had 1 billion views. At one point, they're actually posting 5 days of a week. So that's a hell of a lot of commitment. I mean, you have to come out with quite a lot of content and interesting ideas to do that. So I would say this introduces us automatically to Ruby Franke's mindset, her personality state. And I would say she's perfectionistic at this point and a little bit obsessive. For most of us, the idea of uploading decent content every single day of the week, bar the weekend, is challenging because I don't know, just throwing it out there, I don't live the most interesting of lives. Secondly, making it different to the days before would be challenging. And also, it's about how much time then it's going to take you to edit and so on and so forth. So that can take you away from the very thing that you're trying to say you care deeply about, which in this case with Ruby Franke is her family. But they're making a lot of money. I mean, you've got lots of subscribers, over 2 million subscribers, and you're getting millions and millions, up to 1 billion views, then you are going to be cashing in. It's as simple as that. And I would say as the channel grows, you have the classic scenario unfolding, which is when you put yourself out there on social media, whatever platform it is, people have a right to hate you. There are people out there who really dislike me. There are people out there who call me lots of names. I'm quite aware of the fact that they exist because that's what makes people human. They don't have to like you. It's okay for them to judge you. And as long as you are willing to acknowledge that they have a right to that, even though it might be challenging to acknowledge that that's the reality, that makes it okay. But she, I would say, is putting herself out there and maybe has a few parts and premises of her belief system in life that are more extreme than the average human being would believe was appropriate. As a parent, we know that we all have our roles and responsibilities, our rules and authority that might differ on a subjective level from who we are as a parent to who our friend is as a parent, and so on and so forth. And at times we will think we're the best parent in the world, and at times we will look at other people's lives and think, I don't agree with the way that they're doing A, B or C with their kids. But equally, that's because we're all unique humans and we have a right, as long as it's not abusive, to bring our children up according to those values. But I would say that as she grows and more people are looking in, mostly enjoying her content, but obviously some people feeling annoyed that she's putting her kids out there, because people have that feeling about family vloggers. A lot of people look in and think, you know what, your children don't have that many rights here. They're being put on screen when they're not necessarily ready for this. It can bring predators into focus, and people have that mindset as well. Others will start to dig deep into the way that you are parenting because they'll have questions about whether it's appropriate. And then when you act in a way that they feel is really inappropriate because it isn't in line with their values, maybe the way that you're disciplining your children feels harsh to them, it's going to cause controversy. It's going to mean that there are forums talking about you and so on and so forth. And actually, there are some things I would say that I would struggle with when I look at how she parented. So in one instance, she actually told her sons that they would literally lose the privilege to eat dinner if they continued to play fight. Now, I have had 2 boys, the delight of bringing them up to young men. And if I said, you're going to lose the privilege to eat dinner if you continue to play fight, well, I wouldn't have had a lot of dinner to make, because all my boys ever did was play fight, because that's what kids do. And it wasn't my job as a parent to stop them doing what is completely natural. We also understand that babies and young children like roughhousing, which is a play of rough experience with a primary caregiver, because it teaches them how to deal with boundaries and understand what fear is and make them feel that they have a sense of control over that environment, because obviously the parent is not trying to harm them. So we note that this is a completely instinctual reality for children, and to try to stop that behaviour suggests that her expectations are huge on her kids. Also, she said, and this was a big one, that her 6-year-old daughter had needed to go hungry because she hadn't taken her lunch to school. So basically, Ruby Franke must have thought it was important for her children to have the responsibility to get their own packed lunch in the bag and go to school with it. And because she forgot that and got a call off the teacher, as opposed to doing what, I don't know, 99.99999% of parents would do, which is either say to the school, well, listen, can I just pay some money so they can actually get a hot meal at school? Or give me 15 minutes, I'll hot foot it down to the school and hand the food over. That's what most of us would do, because, you know, they're 6 years of age, they need food, they've got a long day, and actually they're a child, and a young child at that. She doesn't want to do that. She wants to teach her child responsibility. And she actually told subscribers, hopefully nobody gives her food and nobody steps in and gives her a lunch, because then she's not going to learn. Well, she is. She's absolutely going to learn. She's going to learn that at 6-year-old, her mother doesn't care enough about who she is as a child to want her to actually be well fed. That's a really painful lesson. It's an abandoning lesson for a child. And if you're trying to teach them responsibility and accountability, making them feel that they can be abandoned in such a manner is not a positive lesson at all. And it will teach them a lack of love, not a growth in accountability. And also, I bring it back to the point that this child was 6 years of age. 6. Of course they're going to get the lunch. And I would argue that it's the adult in the scenario's job to make sure that the child is ready for school, and it's on you if they don't actually remember to take their packed lunch in. And people are deeply upset about this, and that's the vast majority of us, including me, in that mindset, because it just feels so unfair and so upsetting to think about this 6-year-old child basically being taught this horrible lesson whilst mum goes online and essentially gets views for talking about what a great parent she is for these incredibly strong boundaries, rigid boundaries in fact, that she happens to have created, that the children have had no say in. Now, when her oldest son was 14, he was actually sent by his parents to Anasazi Foundation Wilderness Therapy Program. Now, I'm sure that those of you in the States who know about these therapy programs in the wilderness will have lots of examples of positive ones. But I'm just a little bit of the mindset that I've read too many cases where kids are sent to these wilderness therapy places and horrible abuse happens. Honestly, I'm sure there are some amazing ones, but I just have this real issue with sending your child away to be put through rules and rigorous authoritarian experiences in the guise of going out and spending time in nature to basically traumatize your child to a point where they'll do anything to come home. I just feel again that that is barbaric on a range of levels. But everybody is welcome here. And if you believe in wilderness therapy and have had experiences that are positive, of course, I cannot say that that is not true. But for me, this just again plays into the fact that this family have got some deep-seated roots expectations about what their children should be able to do and be capable of, without actually thinking that maybe some of the behavioural issues are due to the symptomatic experience of being in an environment where they don't feel safe and their parents' care is removed at the drop of a hat when they haven't done something as simple as turn up at school with their lunchbox. But this is what happens. He's sent there. That was actually described as an outdoor behavioural healthcare programme for children ages 12 to 17 who struggle with defiance, family conflict, mental health, lack of motivation, and, quote, other self-defeating behaviours. So it's basically for any teenager. I mean, generally, you could say any teenager fits in that. I mean, anybody who's ever had a child between the ages of 12 to 17, they're going to at points be like, no, I don't agree with you. Well, you're being defiant. Yeah, I'm just saying that I really don't feel that what you're saying about that particular issue is something I agree with. You're going to that wilderness camp. I just said I really didn't want to go for that particular brand of burger. You know, family conflict. You row all the time. Often in families, you love each other, but things are difficult because your child's going through the changes into becoming an adolescent and finding who they are as a human being. The idea that the answer to that is, oh, I'll just go and send you into the wilderness for a while. Also, mental health. Yeah, I've got some struggles with mental health. Have you? What's wrong? I'm feeling really anxious and a little bit depressed. Do you know what we need to do with that? Do you need to hug me? Because I could just do with a hug. I could do with a cup of tea. I don't know. I'm throwing it out there. I'd like to maybe do some social activities with you and just sit down and feel safe. Yeah, they all sound like great suggestions, but I have an even better one. Go on. I'm thinking that if it's better than all of those together, it's going to be great. You're going away for a period of time by yourself into the wilderness with strangers, surrounded by other people who may be quite conflictual and defiant and also pretty unhappy. So that's going to work really effectively to make you feel really great about your life. Off you trot, get packing. See what I mean? It just doesn't make sense to me. Now, he spent around 8 to 10 weeks there. They didn't actually disclose the reasons for sending him there. Kevin, the father in this case, said it's an accumulation of things over the years. He also added that his son needed to, quote, develop some very basic maturity and skills. Well, Kevin, he probably would have if you just let him go through the normal experience of growing up without interjecting some kind of program that I doubt will have had any impact positively on his nature. Also, a video which I would say received the most significant backlash was actually published in 2020. So her teenage son at this point talked about the fact that his bedroom had basically been taken away from him. So he hadn't had access to his bedroom essentially for 7 months. He'd been sleeping on a beanbag. And the reason for this is he was being punished for playing pranks on his sibling. And I can only assume that's because Ruby Franke et al. Had no sense of humour. Again, if playing pranks and play fighting and being a normal teenager is enough to get your bedroom taken off you, to be sent to a camp and all the associated issues that no doubt were thrown at that child, I wouldn't have seen my children, well, for a decade. My kids are older. I've got a young child, as you know, but I have a 21-year-old and a 19-year-old, and they still play fight before dinner every day. It's constant. The thuds I hear, I think somebody's coming through the roof. They're not. They're just having a laugh. So like I say, pranks, I play those. If you do not at least 3 times a day find me jumping out at you for absolutely no reason, having crouched in some corner or cupboard or behind a door, it's not a normal Monday. That's all I'm saying. But Ruby Franke obviously would be sending me off to a wilderness therapy program. I would love to see them trying to manage me on such a program. Genuinely, they would be sending me back, probably pronto, probably paying the person who'd sent me just to take me back. What I'm putting out there is, most of us agree, right? It's not normal to want your child to be anything other than what these kids are being punished for. You want your kids to play fight. You want your kids to have fun with each other. You want your kids to forget things because they're kids and remind you that you have a sense of worth in their life because you're the grown-up. You want your children to be children. And yes, you want them to mature, and you know who's going to help them do that? You are as the parent. You are as the mentor. You are, because you love them. You don't give up on them, throw them to somebody else when the going gets tough. You just make it clear that you will always be present for them. So Franke had added to that video that I've just described that he was basically unable to manage a bedroom. And so because of this, he was given a guest bed or an inflatable mattress instead. So when this video was published, it got a lot of attention. People were really disturbed by the incident. They felt it was really inappropriate that a young man of his age was going through this. And also because it was almost seen as his feelings were irrelevant. It was kind of seen as a laughing scenario where, you know what, yeah, he deserves what he's getting. And as if there was no real concerns in that moment that we're affecting this child because he's being humiliated by the situation. Also the stoic acceptance that he seemed to have that this had occurred. So it was nothing new to him. And when people are watching a family and realizing, listen, this is borderline abuse and this is nothing new to the children, they're not struggling with it, they've just accepted it, it's because it's become typical in their life. And when you see a child who's got used to that experience, it absolutely screams red flags. Also, what happens when you have a middle-class family in a nice home is it makes abuse more palatable to the masses. I'm not saying that people accept abuse. We never accept child abuse. I'm saying that when you are looking at a shiny environment that looks lovely and you've got this pretty mother who just seems to have it together, who just has some very strong boundaries, when she is doing things that are completely inappropriate, because it's all shiny and glossy and lovely and everyone's eloquent in the family, it can dissuade you from believing that what you are seeing is indeed abuse. But because some people didn't like her and they aren't wearing those rose-coloured spectacles that others who like the family are, they're seeing straight through it, and so it blows up. Now, because of that, it led to lots of older clips resurfacing of all these other disciplinary measures, things like withholding meals, and it just makes the headlines. And it's going to. Because when you've got an audience of over 2 million people, that's a lot of people who are looking in and holding you to a certain level of behaviour and account. And you know, Ruby Franke was very quick to hold her children to account. So she should undeniably and absolutely accept it when others hold her to the same kind of account. Now, at this point, a petition is actually started online, and this demands an investigation. It actually brought in more than 17,800 signatures, so people were really annoyed by what they'd seen. Many were very concerned by what they'd seen, and people wanted some kind of action. And indeed, Child Protective Services were called in June 2020. Now, reportedly, Utah's Division of Child and Family Services did visit the household, as we would expect, but the case was eventually closed, and that was due to unsupported claims. But again, you have to consider it in this manner. They're going to go to a lovely home with a mother who looks like she's peaches and cream, with an environment that seems super safe. And on a comparison level with some of the places that are going to be going, it's going to be really hard for them to see that this environment and these children are in a position of harm. And unfortunately, it's that bias, it's that pretty privilege for some people that means that they probably weren't ultimately looking quite as deeply as they should have been looking in this case. And this is when it goes out there online, and I suppose YouTube and TikTok blows it up because they don't feel that these children are in a safe environment, and they don't necessarily feel that Ruby Franke should be out there telling people that this is an appropriate way to bring children up. So they're making lots of videos about the family. It gets loads and loads of attention, and in response to the clips, Ruby and Kevin Franke end up telling a news outlet that there were loads of people out there who were just doing this maliciously towards them, basically suggesting that people had it in for them, and they were saying that they took the clips out of context. But it's an easy argument that, oh, they took the clips out of context. Listen, we can edit clips together. We know that this can happen. It's happened in lots of situations, in lots of scenarios that have affected people negatively. If you can edit effectively, then you can line up particular words and make people say things that actually aren't what they said. But usually you have the original video that can go out there and make it clear that the person has done this and changed it accordingly, and that wasn't indeed what was said. And when you have a massive audience, well, that's not a problem, is it? Because the 2 million people who are going to see your information and more are going to be able to go against the person who's made up this malicious content. But it's more likely that she didn't like the fact that people were interpreting it their way as opposed to her way. So they're looking at these videos and saying, oh, I'm judging you because I don't agree with you. And what she's doing is saying, well, you don't understand the intent behind that, and you're misinterpreting it, and therefore it makes it malicious. As a couple, they were speaking to news outlets, and they said they were purely seeking to throw hate. That was their only objective. A reasonable person would not have seen that video and thought, she's a child abuser. I'm pretty sure, Ruby Franke, the irony is that what you were getting there was people trying to give you a warning that your behaviour was completely inappropriate and that they were seeing it as abusive. And that should have been a wake up. That should have been your big wake up call. where people are saying, you are going too far, this is not acceptable, this behavior towards your children is bordering on abuse or is indeed considered by me abuse, and you need to change your behavior, change your actions towards these children. That's not what she's doing. She's deflecting. It's not me. It's not the fact that I'm treating my kids inappropriately, even though I'm videoing it and putting it out there, and that's where the judgments are coming from. No, no, no. It's those people who are saying I'm doing things incorrectly without really understanding the intention behind it. Now, I would say this was really the controversy that began the end of them making family videos on the YouTube channel. So following the controversy, they basically reduced the videos from posting nearly every single day to posting 2 to 3 times a week. And then eventually they stopped posting all together. So after 7 years, this is in 2021, the channel ended. The channel's actually now been removed from YouTube. But for most of us doing YouTube, someone like myself, who's been a content creator here for a few years now, the idea of having 2 million subscribers is literally insane to me. I can't believe that I have the 200,000 that I have. I just wake up and think, what a blessing. This is incredible. This is amazing that these people trust in my channel and come and watch my content. To build something to 2 million plus and then to let it go is inconceivable to me. And again, it speaks to me of something within the psyche of Ruby Franke. Certainly, she isn't somebody who likes to be told what to do. She has her mindset that she's decided is the correct mindset, and she doesn't like judgment. It's very clear. And that means that there must be a set of beliefs that she holds that are incredibly rigid. Because like I said, to let go, forget the fact that she'll be making money from that channel, to have built it, to have actually created something that so many people have applauded you on, that so many people have followed. It's not just about taking it from your own family, it's about taking it from those people who have given you the gift of following you and caring for you. And like I said, it's interesting to psychologically consider the kind of mindset, the kind of makeup of the human being on a personality level who would go ahead and do that. Now, despite the fact that she's ended the YouTube channel, I would say that that doesn't temper her taste for being on social media. And in June 2022, Ruby Franke starts creating and publishing videos on a YouTube advice channel called Connections. Now, this channel was actually formed by a woman called Jodi Hildebrandt, and she was Ruby Franke's business partner and apparent counsellor. I'm going to put business partner and counsellor in brackets here because I'm not sure what was going on in their relationship. We can explore that with my own perspective and perception of it shortly, but certainly I find it really strange. Business partner and counsellor, I would put more cult leader potentially, something like that would be placed in a more present position when I think about Ruby Franke and Jodi Hildebrandt. It's a very unusual relationship, but like I said, we'll explore that a little more in detail. Jodi is apparently a clinical mental health counsellor. I would also note that some people dispute just how experienced and professional she was in this field. She was actually born to Jay and Florence Hildebrandt. She was born on January the 17th, 1968 in Arizona. She grew up in Tucson, Arizona. She attended Canyon del Oro High School. She was actually brought up as a devout follower of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Her father was an Air Force pilot, so very middle-class upbringing. She actually participated in the Miss Orem pageant in Utah in 1990. A little bit of extra trivia for you. She was a mother, is a mother, despite the horrifying behaviour that I'm going to talk about towards children that were placed in her trust. She was formerly married to a guy called Brenton C. Pugh. She and he were married for just over a decade. They were apparently married in 1999. They cut ties apparently in 2012. Now, in 2007, Hildebrandt founded the relationship and business counselling business Connections in Orem in Utah. And that counselling business was meant to teach people to improve their lives by, and I'm sorry I'm going to say this in a really ironic way because it just feels so ludicrous that I'm actually stating her basic mission statement, because when I tell you this is just such hypocrisy when we're talking about this case, it just is so ironic. that I even have to put these words out there when we're talking about Jodi Hildebrandt. Because if ever there was a description, this is not the description that you would tally with this woman. So her counselling practice was all about apparently teaching people to improve their lives by being
honest, responsible, and humble.
Honest, responsible, and humble. We all like an honest, responsible, and humble person, don't we? They're not arrogant. They are great when you're organising something because they've got the stuff together in the head. And we like it when people tell us the truth. Don't have to worry about wearing shirts like this because we don't need to be a human lie detector when we're around honest, responsible, and humble people. It's great if she's out there helping people improve their lives by making them become that. It's a pity she didn't go on one of her own courses. I mean, let's just go with the humble bit. Now again, I appreciate that some people will say, well, you can be humble, Emma. You can be humble when you're living in a $6 million house. I think, can you? Can you really be that humble? Are you really a humble person? I don't have an issue, by the way. If anybody's watching this and you got a $6 million, $12 million, $25 million house, good on you. You've obviously been a smart cookie. You've probably worked super hard, unless you've been very fortunate and been born to old money, which is a secret desire that I wish had happened to me, where you're just born into a family array of money and you've just got some kind of trust in your life is to just, I don't know, go and sit in cafes, go in art galleries and just go, yeah, I'm just really rich. I mean, we would all like that. But I don't think humble and living in a $6 million house is something that connects. I think you like to show it off a little bit, don't you? You know, if you're humble and you've got a lot of money, people don't really know about it, do they? You know, if you're humble, people don't turn up to your house and are like, is this hallway a hotel? Is this hallway some kind of, I don't know, theatre? And they don't go to your car and be like, did your car just talk to me like the Kit car when Knight Rider used to be on? Did that happen? Did it just call me David? All I'm saying is that's not humble, but apparently that's what she's teaching other people whilst she's living in her $6 million home. So I think we can all agree that she doesn't necessarily practice what she preaches, and I think that's going to be quite in context with the rest of what I'm going to talk about where this woman is concerned. Now, connections, so this is the latest, shall we say, evolution of her coaching business. That was founded in 2021. And at this point, she's not just teaching people to be humble and honest and responsible. No, she's now focusing on parenting and relationships because at the end of the day, she's had them break down herself. So why not become an expert teaching other people on how to maintain them? Anyway, this was meant to be about teaching people pretty strict ways of being, particularly around children. And it was actually known for these really strict teachings on parenting. Now, according to the Salt Lake Tribune, Jodi Hildebrandt did have some issues in the past when it came down to the law. So in 2012, she was actually put on probation for 18 months. She nearly lost her license. And the reason for this is she was working at the time as a pornography addiction therapist. But then it turns out that she breached a really important and very integral part of being a therapist is she discussed a patient publicly without that patient's permission. Now, that is devastating for any client. It genuinely is. So when we're doing therapy with clients, we have contracts. And the reason for that contract is you need to know that you're safe with me. And I need you to know that we're working towards a particular focus. We're hoping to achieve certain things and you can expect certain things from me in our relationship. Now, one of the pivotal things that you can expect is confidentiality. The only time we will breach confidentiality is if you are a very severe danger to yourself or indeed to somebody else. And we make that very clear in our contracting stage. If I were to work with a client and then go out and discuss them so that people can identify who they are, and it's not even necessarily being direct about that person by disclosing their name. It can be describing their life so that individual realizes you're talking about them. It's so destabilizing for that individual. It's a complete breach of trust. And it can destroy the client-counselor relationship. So it's terrifying that she's out there feeling so superior and so arrogant enough to go ahead and do that. Now, afterwards, she did get her license reinstated with full privileges. So clearly there was a period of time where she was being monitored, but then she was allowed to continue. Now, it seems that Ruby Franke and Jodi Hildebrandt have decided, you know what, we can work together. We have some common ground. We have these ideas about how parenting should be, and that we have great advice for the world around us. Now, bear in mind, both of these women are highly religious. And what you have to remember about the psychology of highly religious people is they believe in a greater cause, and it's a beautiful thing in the right places. Because when you have a faith, that faith drives you. You ask questions such as, what would God wish for me to do? So you're not thinking it from an immediacy perspective on the whole, not if you're doing faith correctly. You're thinking about, even if this is hard, even if this is tough, even if I don't win in this moment because of my actions, I'm doing what I'm doing because it's right. It's about a level of sacrifice at all times, as opposed to giving into ego. So when you have that mindset, on the whole, that works very effectively for people around us because we're compassionate, empathetic, genuinely caring, and we're always asking ourselves, how can I do life better? But at times, when you have that religious belief system, it can leave you open to being vulnerable when people come with stronger points of view and stronger systems ideas about how you should be acting in a faithful manner. So like I said, you're open when you have a belief system, because you believe in something greater, better, more purposeful than just you. You're not just about the self. You're about this wider experience, this wider connection, this wider consciousness. And knowing how to connect with the divine is really imperative for so many faithful people. And that, like I said, can at times make you vulnerable to other people's suggestions about what they believe your faith should look like. And they've already come from a Mormon background, so automatically we're drawn into the fact that they've had quite a rigorous experience of a religious upbringing. So that will be within both of their mindsets and makeups. So they've got this connections channel, and their content was obviously nowhere near as popular as what 8 Passengers had been, because that was a very family friendly, at least to a point, channel. It was interesting to see people who live a slightly different life, and it was very shiny and well done. This one is much more about trying to teach people how they should be as parents and partners. Now, Ruby Franke said that the reason that she actually ended that channel, despite making millions of dollars, was basically to save her children. So she's saying, I didn't want people looking in. I didn't want it to be affecting their lives anymore. No, it didn't have anything to do with everybody judging me harshly. Are you sure, Ruby? Ruby, are you sure that you don't just feel that people were judging you? You went on the news and complained about it. No. I was doing it purely so that I could protect my children, save them. I was saving them. That sounds pretty biblical, yes. Yes, I was saving them, because that's the kind of person I am. I'm a deeply faithful person who doesn't abuse children or make children lie without beds or make children go to school and not eat. I'm not that kind of person. That's just all about being a really lovely parent. No, here I'm saying I didn't want them to go down the road of being seen by the masses and being judged by the masses as children of a parent who's, I don't know, quite abusive. So I ended the channel for them. I think you ended the channel for you. Even just what you said suggested that you ended the channel for you. It does sound like that, but I'm saying you probably need to come to Connections and learn about being a better partner and parent. I've got some great courses available. Anyway, that was where we were going. So she made a lot of money, but she's now saving her children by not doing it anymore. Now, a lot of people who were looking in at this channel, they're thinking, you know what, Ruby Franke, frying pan of fire doesn't quite cut it, because the parenting style that's being promoted by Hildebrandt and by Franke on the Connections channel is extreme. It genuinely is. It's harsh. For example, Franke actually told viewers, quote, that children do not deserve and shouldn't receive unconditional love. I kid you not. I kid you not. You know, when it comes down to children, you shouldn't be loving in an unconditional way. Sorry? Yeah. When it comes down to children, you know those children that you birth? Yeah. My most precious possessions. No, they're not precious, they're problems. And you need to treat them as problems by never being anything but conditional regarding their love. So are you saying that I should give my kids conditions, and if they fail to meet those conditions, I shouldn't love them? Absolutely. I'm thinking that as a newborn, there aren't actually going to be conditions that they can follow. I'm saying that if your newborn does not sleep through the night for 8 hours, then you shouldn't love them. I mean, it doesn't make any sense, does it? Of course, children deserve and need unconditional love. That's the very basis of secure attachment, that children can make mistakes, that children can fall and fail, and it's okay because you're going to dust them off and you're going to help them build resilience and you're going to teach them that you're going to have their back forever. And even when they do things that are bad, you'll still be present because you love them. Even in their worst moments, you love them. You might not agree with what they do, but you love them. But not according to Ruby Franke. Ruby Franke's parenting techniques are really raising eyebrows at this point. And in a 2021 Connections video, she actually starts to reveal that her and her husband had told their youngest kids, their youngest children, that Santa wouldn't be getting them any gifts that year because they'd been selfish and they were not responding to punishment. She even went on to say that whilst the siblings would open their presents, the youngest would receive, quote, gifts of truth, which were boundaries and repentance. I mean, if ever I've wanted a gift on Christmas Day, that's the one for me. I mean, you just bring in the gifts to my siblings. You just let me watch them open those presents. And I'm just going to sit in the corner with my bag of coal and think about how glad I am that I have these boundaries of repentance. I mean, if I haven't wanted boundaries of repentance before, since I've heard about Ruby Franke's bag of boundaries of repentance, I'm thinking maybe I'll try that this year for myself at Christmas. Maybe that's just what I need. She even went on to say, it's because they're so numb, and the more numb your child is, the bigger the outcome. They need to wake them up. So these are children, they're being children, and the punishment for being children is they get no presents at Christmas because she's teaching them some bizarre boundaries. Also, I will note that some people complained about the Frankes saying that there was homophobic language used, there was racist language used, there was transphobic language used, and that was really upsetting. Now, again, everybody has their own point of view, and I do deeply appreciate that certain people in religions in particular do not have what I would consider are the views that I would hold. So certainly in some Orthodox religions, homophobia is not accepted. Trans people will not be accepted. These are things that are about their interpretation of the scripture. So I do appreciate that maybe people are levying those kind of comments, believing that everybody should have those liberal views without considering the fact that, well, if they believe their scripture is teaching something different, it's not acceptable in their eyes for God to accept homosexuals, for example, then they are going to probably say those things without feeling a shred of conscience about it because they believe that God is on their side. Whereas when you're somebody like me, the reality is I just think God would want us all to be really nice to each other. I know people say, well, I mean, that makes you a very selfish God situation because at the end of the day, you're saying, well, I think my God just wants us to all have a cup of tea and all be nice. And of course, we'll all go to heaven if we're sweet to each other. I prefer my God, just throwing it out there. Now, as well as these issues that are coming out, Ruby Franke and Jodi Hildebrandt, they have this Instagram account. It's called Mums of Truth. And again, this is where they're giving the parenting guidance. They genuinely believe that they're here to change the world where kids are concerned. So on this Instagram account, they're urging followers to avoid coping strategies, which seems really strange because coping strategies are quite helpful. That's why they're called coping strategies. I appreciate there can be some negative coping strategies, but if we're just going for the old coping strategies, that would seem like a good idea. But they're basically saying, listen, coping strategies are distracting you from the pain and discomfort of reality and truth. Actually, I think what you'll find is that when you're dealing with the discomfort of reality, you are looking for a coping strategy to help you deal with it more realistically and more effectively so that you could actually manage the feeling without getting lost in negative coping strategies, for example, such as, I don't know, having a pint of vodka. So what they're saying is that coping strategies per se, and by the way, they include things like social media, exercise, socializing. These are apparently all things that you should avoid doing and instead probably sit with the feeling until you've figured out what to do with it. Maybe sit with the feeling until the feeling goes, oh, I should probably go for a run and then go for a bit of exercise. Or when the feeling goes, probably going to call a friend and go out for a drink. You know, that would be socializing. But no, apparently they're on the list of let's not do it. Now, a lot of the people who were criticising these two were saying that it felt very cult-like. It was very authoritarian in the way that they teach. And I think when we consider cults, which is an area of research that I'm really engaged in, what we know is that there is a level of authoritarianism. Of course there is. That's what happens within a cult leader. Also, the rules and rituals that are expected for people to follow often seem completely insane. And that's because the whole premise of being a member of a cult is we have to destabilize you, we have to make you susceptible and malleable to the ideas that the leader has. And certainly part of that is to get you to do things that other people would see as completely ridiculous, because the more I can make you reason with unreasonable, the more likely I can get you to believe whatever it is I want you to believe. So they're coming out with things and convincing people of things that just don't make sense. Like, any practitioner who's worked in mental health would never say, when somebody says, when I struggle with anxiety, go for a run, well, stop. No one would do that. We'd actually be doing the opposite. We'd be saying, that's a great idea. And if you're not doing any exercise, we'd be saying, have you thought about exercise? Why? Because it literally changes the brain chemistry and makes you feel better, and also takes you out from inside to the outside of yourself. And that can be really helpful. But they're doing the absolute opposite. So I can understand why people are looking in and saying this is very cult-like. So that's some of the background on Ruby Franke and Jodi Hildebrandt. So let's get back to the 30th of August 2023. This is after this poor young boy has escaped the home. At this point, 41-year-old Ruby Franke is arrested along with her business partner, 54-year-old Jodi Hildebrandt. And it was actually at Jodi Hildebrandt's multi-million-dollar home where the boy had actually escaped from. The police go in, they find that that's definitely where the two children have been staying. They don't quite know at this point how long those children had been there. Now, according to the search warrant from the day of the arrest, Ruby's 12-year-old son, who actually escaped the home, told the officers that it was Jodi Hildebrandt who put the ropes on his ankles and wrists. He also said that she used cayenne pepper, and that was used to dress the actual wounds along with the honey, and that was because those wounds had been caused by the ropes. And one imagines that must have been incredibly painful. I mean, cayenne pepper is lovely if you put it in a curry, but it's not exactly going to be nice when you put it on a wound that is open. And no matter whether it can be used to treat wounds, and this is certainly not something that I'm schooled in, but I wouldn't imagine that cayenne pepper and honey is going to be that effective. I believe that the fact they were using that was because it would hurt. I mean, if you get that into any kind of open wound, it's going to be incredibly painful. Now, apparently, Franke had been seen on a YouTube video filmed at the Hildebrandt house 2 days earlier. So the police automatically know, listen, Ruby Franke hasn't been unaware of this. She has been at this house very recently, knowing that Jodi Hildebrandt has been carrying out this abuse and the malnourishment and neglect of the children. She is clearly complicit. And when they're arresting these women, it's really strange. I mean, their behaviour is odd. You have Jodi Hildebrandt looking absolutely blindsided when the police officer is saying he's going to come in. She can't quite get it through her head that they've gone about their business getting the right kind of opportunity warrants so that they can get in there. But the way that she acts is entitled. She is no way expecting the fallout of what she's done. And Ruby Franke looks like she's almost catatonic when she's arrested, like she just doesn't want to engage whatsoever, and it's a very strange set of affairs. And again, that brings me to a position and place where I'm looking at both of them and saying, what have they started to create in their belief system? What's going on in their minds that's making them act this way? And I'm drawn to thinking about when Lori Vallow was actually dealt with by the police, a very similar way of acting, as if they are superior to the system and they don't want to engage with the police officers, and that they are aloof in that scenario, so that they are higher than the law in that moment. And certainly when it comes down to Ruby Franke, that feels that she's operating in that manner. Now, days after their arrest, Ruby Franke and Jodi Hildebrandt are charged with 6 counts of aggravated child abuse, a second-degree felony carrying a maximum sentence of 15 years in prison. So they're looking at a lot of prison time. Those charges end up stemming from the alleged abuse of 2 children in 3 ways: physical abuse, malnutrition, and severe emotional harm. Now, aggravated abuse is when a person inflicts upon a child serious physical injury or allows someone else to seriously injure a child in their care. And therefore, that makes absolute sense when we think about the fact that Ruby Franke has without a doubt allowed that to take place. And one of the things I found truly heartbreaking about the videos in this case, where the police are actually going and speaking to the children, you can see that the children don't know what to do, whether they should move, whether they should leave, whether they should speak to the police. They are absolutely terrified. So they have been neglected on every single level, emotionally, physically, and of course psychologically, enormously. And it's devastating. These are children. These are children who are meant to be cared for and loved by a mother who instead has bastardized her nurture, bastardized her belief system, and ended up at a point where indeed the conditions that she's placed on her children to receive care, compassion, and love are so challenging for them to achieve that they're never going to achieve that whatsoever, or ever, in fact. Now, following her arrest, Franke immediately requested an attorney, didn't speak with the officers. At this point, 4 of Ruby's minor children are taken into custody of Child Protective Services. Of course they are, because clearly she is a danger to these children. And like I said, one of the things from the outside looking in and looking at all the video footage is it seems that Ruby Franke considers herself, at least at this moment in time, as aloof and superior to the officers. She's not engaging with them. She doesn't feel the need to engage with them. She disassociates to some degree from the seriousness of what's playing out and instead goes to that zone where in her mind I genuinely believe that she thinks that she is the victim in that moment. Of course, when they're arrested, it just blows up, because you have millions of people who knew about Ruby and Jodi because of the fact that they've done connections, and also because Ruby Franke's been a mother who had a YouTube channel that was really successful. So everybody is invested in finding out what the hell has gone on. How has this woman from 8 passengers ended up probably to be a convicted felon? It just feels like such a fall from grace. And Ruby's eldest daughter, she adds essentially fuel to the fire, and rightfully so. So she's 20 years of age at this point, Jodi Franke. She actually takes to Instagram and she says on Instagram, "Today has been a big day. Me and my family are so glad justice is being served. We've been trying to tell the police and CPS for years about this. I'm so glad they finally decided to step up." So devastating that this poor young woman is coming out and saying, "I have been telling the authorities about this. We've been speaking to them, beseeching them to intervene, and nothing has happened." And it's taken for a 12-year-old, malnourished, tortured boy to escape from essentially a prison in a house for any of this to have a change occur. I mean, that feels so inappropriate that people have been knocking on the door of the authorities and nobody has been answering their call. Jodi also requested that anybody who had links of recordings of questionable or concerning behaviour or videos from 8 passengers in the past, or indeed from connections, maybe videos that they've kept for themselves because they've been interested in what's been said, she'd asked them to share them on a Google Doc because they wanted to compile evidence. And that's one of the most amazing things about living in the digital age, isn't it? We can put things out there and we can delete them. But believe me, somebody out there will have taken a shot of them. Somebody out there will have a recording of it. So even if you want to get rid of particular information, often people will have copies of it and they come with those receipts. It's the modern word, isn't it? I've kept the receipts. And in this case, people absolutely had. Now, Jodi had previously stated that she wasn't actually in contact with her immediate family. She said that she absolutely did not support the extreme beliefs of connections, and incident reports actually had shown how Jodi had indeed previously contacted officials about her siblings. It's devastating that she was ignored. On the 18th of September 2022, she actually alleged that a neighbour indeed had informed her that her younger siblings had been home alone for 5 days. So she's being told that Ruby Franke had literally checked out of being a parent and gone off to Jodi Hildebrandt, which is so, again, contradictory and ironic. She's leaving children alone for 5 days to fend for themselves because she wants to go off and do this connections work and get involved in the horrible torture and discipline of her own children. So the police had actually arrived at one point at the home when that information had been passed to them to conduct a welfare check. They were seen indeed through a window, but none of them would answer the door. Now, the report states that the neighbours informed the police that Ruby Franke would leave her children for extended periods of time to visit Jodi Hildebrandt in St. George. And you're thinking to yourself, why wasn't something done about this? It's ludicrous that nobody intervened. Neighbours had also been contacting officials over the concerns they had about the children. In fact, one neighbour went ahead and claimed that multiple adults in the community had been trying to get the Utah Division of Child and Family Services involved in the child's lives for over a year. They said, we could see Ruby Franke was going away for long periods of time and essentially children were being left home alone. And this particular neighbour said, I'm really angry because I spoke up. Other people spoke up. They said, if people knew the amount of tears and time spent talking with law enforcement and CPS over the last year, I want people to understand that. And I want those kids to know that because I think they thought they were abandoned. And that's so powerful and so important what she says there. She's saying we were all telling the services these children are in need and nobody was acting on it. And the message to those children who are being home alone for periods of time, scared, probably not eating well, wondering where their mother was and when she was going to come back, those children were being given a message by those around them that no one cared, but people did. It's just that the services that were meant to come and save those children failed to do so. Ruby's sisters, they also released a statement and they said that Ruby's arrest needed to happen. They said for the past 3 years, we've kept quiet on the subject of our sister Ruby Franke for the sake of her children. Behind the public scene, we have done everything we could to try and make sure the kids were safe. Now, bear in mind, once they've arrested Ruby Franke, they also need to speak to her husband because they want to know what Kevin Franke's been doing. His children have been left home alone, so is he also complicit in this abuse? So they interview him. Now, in that police interview, Kevin Franke said that his wife and he had separated in the July of 2023. He said that he had carried on to financially provide for them, but he'd had absolutely no contact with his wife or children. He said to the police that there was no court paperwork, but that he and Ruby agreed that he would not contact her or the kids. Now, I'm just going to throw it out there, Kevin Franke, I do struggle just a little bit with this one. I just struggle a little bit when it comes down to the fact that you're like, yeah, I've decided that it's okay, we're going to split up, we've agreed that's going to take place. Oh, right, yeah. So what was the agreement? Well, the agreement was that I was going to financially provide for her and the children. Good man. It's good to be responsible and accountable and to carry on being a loving, protective father. Yeah, I agree. What were the other points that you agreed? I agreed that I would never contact her or the children again for a period of time, maybe ever. Sorry? Yeah, I just said I agree that I'm not going to contact her or the kids. They're your kids, aren't they? Yeah, they're my kids, but I'm not going to contact her or them. So I'm just going to go somewhere else and not contact them at all. Just what? Don't ever agree that you're not going to contact the kids. Don't contact her. That's fine. But maybe, I don't know, speak to your children, particularly children who are obviously being left in a less than perfect situation. Now, during that interview, Kevin also told the police that he thought the family was still living in their Springville home, that he had absolutely no knowledge of the children being in Hildebrandt's residence. Now, after the police said to Kevin that 2 of the children had actually been taken to the custody of Child Protective Services, he then became really emotional. He said it was time to get his kids back into his custody and to take them back into his home to care for them. Throwing it out there again, Kevin Franke, maybe if you'd actually been visiting your children and, I don't know, taking care of them, none of that would have happened because you'd have been present in their lives and taking care of them. And I appreciate that people will say I'm coming down hard on him because at the end of the day, he wasn't the one abusing his children. I get that, but he was responsible for his children. At the end of the day, as a parent, if you separate from the other parent, your kids are still imperative in your world and it's your job and duty to see them regularly, because they need to know that you love them. You don't get to have an excuse of, oh, I didn't know it was happening, I didn't see it. Well, you know what? That's because you choose to look in a different direction. So I really don't have a lot of sympathy or empathy for that position.
No, I don't know. I don't know what's anything that's been going on.
Like, this is good, man. Like, I would love to be able to help you out with this, and like, I'm seeing the light of being, because I'm unaware of your involvement in what's really going on. So for you to say that you're unaware of the status of your kids kind of makes, I know that sounds kind of crummy to you, but it sounds kind of good to me. Like, who lives in that home with your, is it ex-wife? Is you currently a separated wife? Like, who lives in that home with your children?
To be honest, I don't know. I know that she's there with 4 of the children. Our 2 older children have moved out.
Have you communicated with your wife regarding like discipline with your kids or their care or their physical well-being?
No.
So she's doing this on her own and just telling you how your kids are?
She's not telling me anything about it.
Of course, the police said they had literally no indication that Kevin Franke was involved in the abuse, and that's clear. But like I said, he didn't do anything to prevent it. He did actually say that he had been staying in a separate home from Ruby Franke for the past 13 months, that it had been Ruby Franke's decision to separate. He said that he'd really wanted to work through the concerns as a family. But apparently this separation was under the terms prescribed by Ruby Franke and, oh, wait for it, Jodi Hildebrandt. So apparently this separation, this enforced silence between the couple, this is all on the back of something that no doubt Jodi Hildebrandt had thought was a great idea. And Kevin Franke said, listen, my marriage completely changed when Ruby became business partners with Hildebrandt. He said that as far as he was concerned, Ruby Franke was manipulated by Hildebrandt. He also said that Hildebrandt manipulated him and, as he said it, destroyed his family. He described the fact that everything he knew just totally transitioned the moment those 2 women became close. He said the reason that he'd fundamentally agreed to get involved with Connections in 2020 was because his wife, Ruby, and one of his close friends had persuaded him to join a men's group. Apparently it was a men's group that met with Hildebrandt every week. And for a while, he said, it felt as if those meetings and spending time with other guys, talking about relationships, etc., seemed to strengthen their marriage. But things began to change, But things began to change around March 2021. He said this is when Hildebrandt allegedly told her in a circle that she believed she was being, quote, tormented and haunted by shadow figures every night. Now, we all have our feelings about the afterlife. We all have our ideas about ghosts. Some of us believe, some of us don't. But let me tell you, if I was running a group session, number one, I shouldn't really in that group session be talking about what's going on for me, because I'm the leader. It's me facilitating. You, as group members, need to believe that I know what's going on. So the idea that she's bringing in this thing about being haunted by shadow figures every night is a little bit disturbing on every level. But then add to that, if I was running a group session and we were all having a nice chat and then I suddenly go, you know what's really disconcerting at the moment? No, go on. Tell me what's disconcerting. Well, you know, I go to bed at night. Yes, yeah. Go to bed at night. I go to bed at night as well. Yeah. Well, after I've had my cuppa and I've got my little eye mask on and I've gone through my skincare routine, I lie down and then probably within 15 minutes I get haunted by shadowy figures. Sorry? Yeah, I'm getting haunted by shadowy figures. What kind of shadowy figures? The shadowy. I don't know, I'm getting haunted by them. They sound like ghouls. Yeah, like ghouls. Haunted by shadowy ghouls. That's what's happening. Have you thought that maybe we need to go to A&E? No, I'm just thinking that somehow together we're going to figure something out. Maybe an exorcism. Maybe we can do that next Wednesday in the group after we've had some digestives and a cup of tea. All I'm saying is if that was brought into me, either as a facilitator by one of my clients, or if I was a facilitator with a group of clients, I'd hope that somebody would be like, that's not normal. We probably need to get you some help here. But apparently, in spite of the fact she's getting tormented and haunted by shadowy figures every night, by the mid-April, she's decided the one person who's going to be able to help her is Ruby Franke. So by mid-April of that year, That's what happens. She reaches out to Ruby Franke, and Ruby Franke's like, I can do that. I can do that. I can intervene and do that. Shadowy figures, no problem. If I'm not thinking about how to deal with shadowy figures that are haunting somebody on a regular basis, I don't know what I'm doing. So what's the plan? What's the plan with the shadowy figures, Ruby? Well, what you need to realise about shadowy figures is if you unconditionally love them, it's the problem. You've got to give them some conditions, rigid boundaries. You've got to do things like that. You've got to make it clear who's boss. I'm taking away the shadowy figure's shadowy figure. I'm taking away the cloak they wear. They won't be shadow anymore. That's what I'm saying. That's what's going to happen. I'm the right person to come to. Are you wearing a backpack? Yeah. To be honest, it's not a backpack. It's actually a Ghostbusters pack that I got from a fancy dress shop. But anyway, that's a different thing. Let's go back to the fact that I'm going to sort this out and no one's going to get haunted by shadowy figures again. You know, it just doesn't make any sense, but this is where we're going. Now, he, at this point, as Ruby Franke's husband, said, look, I don't believe this. I don't want anything to do with it. And again, people who come from a religious background could say, well, he on a physical level could be really disturbed by this because he's thinking, well, if there is anything demonic, because people who have deep faiths often believe that that can be possible. People can actually get haunted by demons, and that would be terrifying for him. He's probably thinking to himself, I'm not the guy for this. You're not the girl for this. We're not even from a Catholic background. It's the old Catholics at the Vatican sorting that stuff out. You need to get one of those special priests to do it. I'm not asking that demon its name. The next minute, my head will be spinning 3 times. I'll be projectile vomiting. And I don't know, I'll explode. So he's kind of backing out. Now, he'd also talked about the first time that he visited Hildebrandt's home. That was back in May 2021. This is where they're opening up about the struggles that they're having as a couple. And he said at that point in time, he really struggled being around Hildebrandt because he said there were crashes in the basement. He said whilst they're talking upstairs, he could hear plates in the kitchen just flying off by themselves. He said like full speed, smashing on the wall and falling to the floor by themselves. I mean, God love him. I would never have gone back there again. Seriously, I'm literally thinking about that scene where Jodi Hildebrandt is going, I'm just not feeling myself. You know, plates whizzing past her ears. I'm getting haunted by shadowy figures, groans and crashes from the basement. I mean, I would have lasted around 6 seconds and then I would have fled screaming before blocking her on every network I had and refusing to ever engage with her again. So even though I may think that there are some potential explanations for why those things were happening around her that might not involve some kind of demonic force, equally, it must be really disconcerting to be in an environment where somebody is talking like that and there seems to be evidence that something untoward and otherworldly is playing out. Kevin Franke said eventually he reluctantly agreed to take Hildebrandt into his and Ruby Franke's home, and he said he actually started to see her go into trances. He said the moment she showed up at my house, just the weirdest crap started happening. Lights turning on and off, sounds of people walking in walls, like footprints going up walls and across the ceiling and stuff floating around. He said it was weird and I hated it and I became the resident exorcist. Just going to throw it out there. Kevin Franke, obviously you weren't the most effective exorcist with respect if those things carried on. But again, it's notable that when he's asked to retreat from Ruby Franke and not contact her or the children, if all that was really going on, all that negative energy that he would believe was occurring, you can imagine that just cutting off contact would probably feel quite positive because he's probably terrified. He also said that as soon as Hildebrandt and Ruby Franke were spending so much time together, Ruby Franke starts going into her own trances. This was happening by September 2021. And apparently during these alleged trances, she believed she was in heaven, speaking with God, speaking with Jesus. This again reminds me of the Lori Vallow situation. It's a case that I am going to cover on this channel. I'm sure that all of you know the Lori Vallow case. If not, you can look it up. But again, the idea that there's this direct line with God. And Kevin Franke said that she and Hildebrandt would basically just lock themselves in a room for hours, after which he said that Ruby Franke would tell him about the visions that she had and the work that God had called upon them to do. This apparently is probably the main reason that he and Ruby split up. So then once he'd left the home, he said the only way I would ever get back into my house was I had to get Jodi's approval, because if I didn't get Jodi's approval, I would never get Ruby's approval. He said, I'm looking back on it, I'm realizing there wasn't a solution, and it was you either had Jodi's approval or you didn't. He said, she became like the arbiter of truth, the arbiter of forgiveness, God's own mouthpiece. Now that's really intriguing, because you can just hear how Jodi Hildebrandt has essentially coerced Ruby Franke into feeling sorry for her, getting her to invite her into her home, making her feel special, making her believe that the two of them have got some weirdly close connection, not just with one another, but with God, and creating this wedge between Ruby Franke and her husband, and then slowly eradicating and eroding the relationship altogether to a point where he leaves, and now she holds the key to whether their relationship can work again or indeed will fail. And that must just be so destabilizing for Kevin Franke, and also for the respect he has regarding his wife, Ruby Franke, who he has spent his life with for a long period of time, bringing up these children and essentially living a life together. But again, this is why I earlier on said I have some real concerns about the relationship between Ruby Franke and Jodi Hildebrandt, because I'm going to tell you what I think. I think that Jodi Hildebrandt had physical romantic feelings and intent towards Ruby Franke. That's my feeling. When I look into this, I think that Jodi Hildebrandt was absolutely infatuated with Ruby Franke. I think she was deeply attracted to her, and I feel that she initially realized that Ruby Franke was in a relationship with a male and was in a relationship that she wanted to work with her husband, and that was something that Jodi Hildebrandt really didn't want. But equally, she probably knew that it didn't feel a good fit for Ruby Franke, at least initially, to have an attraction towards her. It didn't feel something that she wanted to pursue, and it probably wasn't in her mindset or even on her radar. So she creates this scenario where she gets the intensity and connection with Ruby Franke by suggesting that the two of them are special, that they're on this journey together. And she starts to get Ruby Franke to believe in this mindset, in this belief system, that they are special, that they are essentially going to do God's work together, and that their relationship is more unique, more beautiful, more connected, more pure than the relationship that she has with her husband. It's a way of deconstructing everything that she had in her actual present life being replaced by what Hildebrandt wishes to replace, which is a relationship with her of some way, shape or form. I'm not saying it would have been sexual, but I'm saying there is something intense, there is something desperate in the way that Hildebrandt wants to pull her away from everything that she's known to create something new. And by the way, I'm not forgiving or defending Ruby at all. She deserves everything that she's got in this case, but I'm saying there is something very uncomfortable about the way that this is going. And when people describe it as cult-like, I understand that, because you have this woman who has had rigid belief systems already, find this new, even more rigid belief system when it comes down to Hildebrandt and what she's preaching. And now the two of them are in this very unholy alliance, so to speak. Now, 3 months after Ruby Franke is arrested, it won't surprise you to know that her husband filed for divorce. Understandably, he knew that their relationship was over, and he also realised at this point that she was probably facing a very stern sentence in prison. We get to the 8th of September 2023. At this point, both Ruby Franke and Jodi Hildebrandt are denied bail by a judge. This was because of the severity of the injuries of her two kids located in the home. So they didn't feel that either of those individuals were safe to be walking the streets, and certainly it made the children feel safer knowing they were locked up. There was also a shelter hearing. This was to determine the custody of the 4 minor children. Ruby Franke did a video conference in and basically used that time to deflect her behaviour onto her children. So at this point, she's basically saying that one of her children had confessed to abusing 20 other children, including siblings, cousins and neighbours. Bear in mind, she provided absolutely no evidence for these allegations, but of course that meant the child would need to be placed in a home with no other children. So it's a way of, again, punishing this child that she's decided to out as this abuser with no evidence whatsoever, so that they cannot be around other children, which is incredibly cruel. Also, we will all know of abuse cases where a parent will beat a child to admit whatever they want them to admit, because it gives them a permission base to carry on being abusive. So it could well be that this child has admitted to abusing a whole heap of people because you are being beaten and abused. You'll just agree to anything if it makes the beating stop. So this will again be her mindset. She'll have probably created all these scenarios in her head and made it real by hurting the children till they agree with her position. Now, after that shelter hearing, Jodi Hildebrandt's niece, Jodi Hildebrandt, came forward, and that person accused their aunt of severe emotional, spiritual and psychological abuse. They said she wanted to make my life so uncomfortable that it would force sin out. This continually got worse and worse. They accused her of duct taping their mouth shut, blindfolding them and telling them they were too dangerous to be around other people. This resulted in isolation periods of up to 12 hours a day. They said, I was forced to sleep outside in the snow. Jessie went on to say that aunt had support from the Mormon church, even though people had spoken out against her. They said, we have a culture of not believing children and not trusting children. Children trust their parents and their parents trust the church. And that is absolutely 100% true in so many circumstances when it comes to the closing of ranks around the abuse of children where religious environments are concerned. We've seen that all across the Catholic Church, all across the Muslim faith. It happens wherever there is religion. I know most religious people are going, I get it. I am saying though, in certain scenarios where allegations have been made, ranks have been closed, people have been shut down. And it's a very isolating, abandoning experience for victims. We get to December 2023, and I would say that Ruby Franke has had a period of time to really start reflecting. She's also had time away from Jodi Hildebrandt. And that intensity that she's got used to, that conditioning that she's got used to, it's dissipated. And now, as opposed to being the person blaming her children, instead, she's taking accountability. She's accepting responsibility, and she pleads guilty to 4 counts of child abuse. She actually took a deep breath before pleading guilty on each charge. On her 4th and her final charge, she said, with my deepest regret and sorrow for my family and my children, guilty. She admitted that she'd abused both a son and a daughter, and in her plea agreement, graphic details of the abuse were included. She said that her son was often kept bound. Yes, he'd tried to run away in July 2023, understandably, so that resulted in him being regularly bound because now he's a threat. Sometimes they used handcuffs. At times, her son was bound with ropes that secured his hands and his feet as he lay on his stomach, like hog tying him essentially, so lifting his arms and legs off the ground, and that caused injuries to his wrists, to his ankles. She also admitted that she held her son's head underwater, that she kicked him while she was wearing boots, that she smothered his mouth and nose with her hands. She admitted that she tortured her son from May the 22nd to the 30th of August by forcing him to do hours of physical tasks, summer work outdoors without water, and also that he got repeated and serious sunburns that blistered because of that work. He was also told that everything that was being done to him were acts of love. So that's the classic, isn't it? I'm hurting you because I love you. I'm hurting you because you're sinful. I'm hurting you so that I can protect you. It's confusing beyond belief for children. They're looking at the person that they love because that's your mother. And you're just thinking this person must want what's best for me, but it hurts. It's painful. I'm scared. And all the while, the love that you have for them just seals your fate further. You're desperate to get away. You know what's happening is wrong, and yet you question yourself. You say to yourself, maybe she sees the bad in me. Maybe she is trying to help me. Maybe she is trying to protect me. And they're caught in that duality of experience, the agony of the torture, with the being convinced it comes from a place of love. Her 9-year-old daughter, 9 years of age at this point, she was made to do manual labor outside in the hot sun. She didn't have water, she didn't have shoes, could have killed her. Both of the children were always told they were possessed. They were told that the punishments were necessary to help them. And the little girl who was 9, she was 100% convinced that what her mother was saying to her was true, that she was bad, that she was demonic, that she deserved what was happening. They were both denied food. They were both denied water. Ruby Franke physically isolated her children from other people. They didn't have access to books, to notebooks, to electronics. In court, a lawyer actually claimed that the abuse was influenced by a relationship counsellor who had contributed to her, quote, distorted sense of morality. So clearly, that was alluding to Jodi Hildebrandt. But again, deflecting it all onto Jodi Hildebrandt and saying, well, at the end of the day, she just did what she was being told by this counsellor who'd given her a distorted view of morality. Well, okay, you can say that, but it doesn't mean that Ruby Franke wasn't 100% aware that what she was doing was causing pain. She had eyes, she had ears. Now, as part of her plea deal, Ruby Franke agreed to serving prison time. She agreed to consecutive sentences and also agreed to testify against Hildebrandt. In her attorney's statement, he described Ruby Franke as a, quote, devoted mother, committed to constant improvement. Now, I am just going to say, if I had heard that in line with what I've talked about today, I would have been laughing as they dragged me out of the court. Because the idea that she's a devoted mother is ludicrous. She's egocentric. Ruby Franke is egocentric. It's all about her. She believes she knows the right way. Hey, she's God's messenger. She is so superior and aloof in her belief system that essentially she would do whatever she thought was right to fulfill whatever her ideas were regarding the appropriate way to be, even if it cost everybody else around her. And indeed it did. It cost her husband, it cost her older children, it cost her younger children horribly. And right now, to some degree, she's saying, hey, I was a really devoted mother. Yeah, I horribly abused my kids, but you know what? It was all Jodi Hildebrandt's fault. Well, it wasn't Jodi Hildebrandt's fault when she was doing the 8 Passengers YouTube channel and people were moaning and complaining and upset and triggered because of the abuse that she was inflicting on her children then. But basically, he says she's a victim of manipulation. He said initially, Ms. Franke believed that Jodi Hildebrandt had the insight to offer a path to continual improvement. Ms. Hildebrandt took advantage of this quest and twisted it into something heinous. Over an extended period, Ms. Hildebrandt systematically isolated Ruby Franke from her extended family, older children, and her husband, Kevin Franke. This prolonged isolation resulted in Ms. Franke being subjected to a distorted sense of morality. Is it just me who thinks? Probably the bit where Hildebrandt was coming in and saying, I have these things haunting me at night. At that point, you would imagine that Ruby Franke would have the good imagination enough to think, maybe I shouldn't be taking advice from this woman. Maybe this woman has a few issues. But apparently no. Let's just throw it all out. Ruby Franke is just simply a victim. Now, days after Franke pled guilty, Hildebrandt also pled guilty to 4 counts of child abuse. In her plea agreement, she said that she either tortured the children or was indeed aware of the abuse. In the agreement, Hildebrandt admitted that she either physically forced or coerced Franke's daughter to jump into a cactus multiple times. I kid you not. Literally, she made her jump into a cactus multiple times. I can't even imagine how painful that was. Through the plea deals, 2 of the child abuse counts were actually removed for both of them. And before their sentencing, both women were able to address the court. Ruby Franke admitted that she and Hildebrandt had, quote, inflicted the injuries on her children. She apologised to the children and attributed her abuse to being under the influence of a dark delusion for the past 4 years. She said, my distorted version of reality went largely unchecked, as I would isolate from anyone who challenged me. She said she'd been led to believe that this world is an evil place And she said that she paid Hildebrandt to be her mentor. She thanked the public safety officials who rescued her children. She called them angels. She said, "My charges are just. They offer safety to my family, accountability to the public." Is it just me that also feels that what she's doing now is she's going, "I'm a martyr. I have realised the error of my ways because I was under a dark delusion. I have had no control in this situation. It was not of my own volition. No, I was dealing with shadowy figures at night. My friend was dealing with, and they then became a problem for me too, and this created an illusion, and none of this is actually what I did, and I'm totally innocent, but aren't I a good person? Accepted responsibility in this monologue." Maybe I am being judgy, guys, but that's how it comes across to me. Now, when it came down to Hildebrandt, she said that she would submit to what the state feels is an appropriate amount of time served. So she told the court that she loves Franke's children. "I love them. I love Ruby Franke's children." Sorry, which ones? All of them. I love every single one of them. I love them. Did you love the one that you tortured and tied up and put honey and cayenne pepper on the wounds? I love them. I love them so much that I decided to torture them, indeed, and to abuse them further by dressing their wounds in an agonising way. Did you basically tell them that demons were within them and that they were terrible individuals and that you were doing it all for their own good? Yes, that's how much I love them. I love them enough to love the demons out of them. Can somebody agree that the state can make a decision over the way that she's treated that might not be in line with what the law would ordinarily do? I don't know. Maybe send her off to those dark, shadowy figures that came to her at night. Just let them have their way with her. Maybe, just throwing it out there, maybe we can all agree that on this occasion, Hildebrandt, because she loves the children so much, could experience something of a similar nature because it's loving. Why are you doing that to me? Because we love you. We love you. But why are you tying me up in prison? Because we love you. Why are you abusing me in this manner? It's love. It's not abuse, Jodi Hildebrandt. It's love. And we hope that you're going to have a wonderful future whilst being loved so deeply by all of us prison officers. It just beggars belief. Now, ahead of their sentencing, Ruby Franke's parents and brother, they basically talked about the fact that Hildebrandt's influence had a real impact on Ruby Franke's actions. Her brother said, "At the continued encouragement of Miss Hildebrandt, Ruby systematically pushed those around her away. First myself, and then our sisters, parents, and close friends, and then her husband, and finally her own children. Ruby Franke has clearly been brainwashed. She has been taken advantage of by Miss Hildebrandt." Her parents said that for 3 years, there'd only been brief communications with her daughter where she accused us of either things that never happened or she grossly exaggerated the events that did. They said she was delusional. They said she was so deeply brainwashed we could not recognise her. Now again, that's where the cult comparison comes in. People say that's what cult leaders do. They make somebody susceptible and malleable, getting them to do all these things that other people consider crazy. It makes them lose themselves, and that cult leader then replaces the ideas of the individual follower with their own ideas. So they become completely in line with the cult leader's view of the world. Equally, we could say, maybe Ruby Franke had a bit of a narcissistic, egocentric streak, and what she wanted was to be special, and the way to be special was to have somebody validate and make her feel that she was super special, and Jodi Hildebrandt was doing that. "Yeah, you're amazing. Yeah, Ruby, you're right. Yeah, Ruby, we can do this together. Yeah, Ruby, we've got a direct line to God." And that's what Ruby Franke wanted to hear. Now, in court, Kevin Franke, the father, he appeared alongside their 2 eldest children. He actually asked for the maximum sentence to be imposed on Ruby. He called the abuse horrific and inhumane. Whilst speaking from the stand, Ruby did actually apologise to her former husband. She said, "You are the love of my life. The ending of our marriage is a tragedy." Well, with respect, I mean, I think it was a tragedy when you said he wasn't allowed to see you or the kids at any point, and only Jodi Hildebrandt could make a decision as to whether he could visit. That was pretty tragic, wasn't it? Now, whilst the state prosecutor read the sentencing recommendation, he actually compared the environment of Franke's children to a concentration camp-like setting and said that Ruby Franke committed horrible acts of child abuse. He called Jodi Hildebrandt a significant threat to the community. 42-year-old Ruby Franke was sentenced to at least 4 years in prison for child abuse. As she learned of a sentence in court, she basically tearfully apologised. She said, "I was so disorientated that I believed dark was light and right was wrong." I do again feel like she scripted this in her head, honestly. It's very Hollywood movie style. When it came down to Jodi Hildebrandt, she was given the same sentence. So it ended up that they were both jailed for 4 terms of 1 to 15 years each. The sentences are going to be served consecutively as opposed to concurrently. Now, Utah code states that when a court imposes consecutive sentences, the maximum amount of time that can be served is 30 years. So it's going to come down to the Utah Board of Pardons and Parole to see how long they are actually going to spend in prison. But it seems that they will be serving a lengthy prison sentence, and 100% rightly so. It seems that all of those people who were looking at those YouTube videos and started to get very concerned about what they were seeing were 100% correct. Now, following the sentencing, the Washington County's Attorney's Office released the handwritten diaries where Ruby Franke was basically just detailing how she carried out the abuse. Is it just me? Or do a lot of people with psychopathic mindsets just not find themselves able to hold back when it comes down to journaling? They just have to write it down somewhere. Ruby Franke reportedly wrote that her young son and daughter, referred to as R and E, were the spawns of Satan. She wrote things like, "I will not feed a demon." She called her son a compulsive liar with a, quote, "cold, dead heart." She wrote about shaving the boy's head as a punishment for refusing to perform wall sits and pushing him into the pool whilst covering his mouth and nose, writing "big day for evil." That's what she wrote in there at the time. She detailed how she punished her manipulative daughter, including making her stand in the rain for hours, dousing her in dog wash water after she complained that she hadn't ate for days. Like, how dare she? She had the temerity to complain about the fact she hadn't been fed for days. So the consequence of that was she's washed in dog water. She said, "If you engage a weak-minded soul in a physical activity of obedience, you can begin to break the bond Satan made with the weak." Now, days before the actual arrest, this is on August the 27th, that journal stated that the children were whipped. It said, "I whipped him with a belt yesterday. She peed all over Jodi's garage floor, screamed at her, lied to her," the journal reads. "She's out of control. She seemed to get attention after the whipping." So you're talking about children being horrifically abused, and then when I would suggest the 9-year-old wets herself in terror and trauma, she's harmed even further. She's seen as a devil's spawn, as opposed to a child dealing with horrific abuse. When I read that, the rage I felt and the justice I desired for those children was just absolutely enormous. Washington County Attorney said in a statement that the crimes committed by the pair were motivated by their religious faith. They said, "This is a case about religious extremism. The defendants appear to have fully believed that the abuse they inflicted was necessary to teach the children how to properly repent for imagined sins and to cast the evil spirits out of their bodies." Clark said, "Hildebrandt regularly stated that God communicated directly with her and gave her directions. Franke accepted Hildebrandt as her leader and followed her instructions and guidance." Again, are we just diminishing the role here of Ruby Franke? I think so. Just to quote the fact that she used to have a channel 8 passengers. Well, in this, that's what they're trying to make her, a passenger. Somebody who was just going along for the ride. Somebody who just went down the wrong road with this woman who was leading her in a completely inappropriate direction. I don't get that. I think Ruby Franke was absolutely fully culpable. She took those children to Hildebrandt. She allowed Hildebrandt to do horrible things, and she engaged in those horrible things as well. She had had a perfectly acceptable structure around her of support, a family who loved her. She chose to remove and reject those to follow Hildebrandt and to be with Hildebrandt in what I would consider a very codependent relationship on both sides in the most heinous of ways. It won't surprise you to know that Kevin Franke is actually suing Hildebrandt because he feels that she created a destructive path for his family. But in spite of that, I still come down absolutely believing that Ruby Franke is 100% as culpable as Hildebrandt in this story. And again, I just feel like people look at somebody like Ruby Franke and go, oh, how could somebody who looks like that really be this bad? Well, because nature doesn't pick and choose. You get born with a predisposition. You can be beautiful and be evil. You can be conventionally unattractive and be beautiful inside. That's the way it works. In this case, we have somebody like Ruby Franke, an individual with a personality who desires people to follow her, who desires people to revere her, to see her, as far as I'm concerned, as quite godly. And so she found another person who reflected that belief in Hildebrandt. And together, they carried out their evil actions. And that's indeed what they were and are, evil actions. I really hope that all of her children are now living good lives. I hope their success is their greatest revenge. And I hope that they thrive on every single level. I hope Hildebrandt's niece, who was treated so awfully, I hope that they are living a good life. I hope that they too are thriving. I hope that if you've heard of this case before, I've still given you some added value, that you understand it a little bit more deeply. If you have any information on this, please do let me know. I would really like to know any information that you have. It always fills me and thrills me when you have additional content and context that I can learn from. Take care, guys. I'll see you again next time. Remember, always be safe.